My name is Joshua Gibson, and you are listening to the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast, a show dedicated to promoting a message of critical thinking as it pertains to strength training, nutrition, and well-being. This is done through interviews with experts, high-level athletes, coaches, and people heavily involved in strength sports and athletic development. Pull up a chair, grab a coffee, and let's get on to today's podcast. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. My name is Joshua Gibson. I'm your host, and I'm joined today by a man who, by my estimation, is one of the strongest people in USA weightlifting and is right on the heels of Keiser. And that's actually the reason I wanted to get him on the podcast, is because if you're listening to this, you've already listened to the episode with Keiser, the super heavyweight, who is on the cusp of becoming, by numbers, the strongest American weightlifter of all time, and or the best American weightlifter of all time is a super heavyweight. And if you haven't listened to it, I'd highly recommend going back to it. It's just episode 211. It's the last show. If you're listening to this much later, go find that one. Listen to this one after, because I think this is going to create a really cool sequence of, we have the number one guy, and then we have, the number two guy. And there are a lot of differences between the two. And then I think there are a lot of similarities. So that guy who's kind of right on the heels of Keiser is Aaron Williams. How's it going, Aaron?
Going pretty good. Can't complain. How about yourself?
It's going well. Always a good time to hop on a podcast and chat it up with someone who kind of takes, I want to say, takes the sport a bit by storm and kind of comes out of quote unquote nowhere. We say that it's like, oh, this person, Kate Nye pops on this, or Kate Vibert pops on the scene, and it's like, holy cow, she's so close to American records and international teams. And it's like, oh yeah, but she's had all this time as a gymnast and in CrossFit and other sports. And I know for yourself, it's easy to say you kind of just popped on the scene, but I'm sure you've been throwing around weights and doing things that are athletic for a really long time.
Oh yeah, I'm sure we'll get into it later, but I mean, I spent a little bit of time around football, track, field, not so much running, of course, since I'm a super, but I've seen my fair share of the weight room. It's always been a kind of a passion of mine, and whenever I finally got done playing football, weightlifting just ended up giving me another way to compete and kind of give myself a goal in the gym, and not just going in every day doing bicep curls and calling it.
Yeah, I think that's what all programs either evolve from or devolve into is, it was, I'll do some bench press and I'll do some back, then I'll do some curls. That was my program. Then it became, I'm going to do full on bodybuilding program, full on powerlifting program, full on weightlifting program. And I slowly see it becoming, I'll do my weightlifting and then I need to do my curls. And I could see that flip-flopping at some point where I come in, I do my curls, and it's like, no, it's a primer. It's going to make me better at weightlifting for some reason. I don't know how. And then suddenly the whole program's just a 10 by 10. I'm blowing out the sleeves on all my T-shirts, but, all of my pants don't fit. So I think that's a very accurate representation of kind of the life cycle of a lifter. And I really want to get into your background. I think that's going to be highly relevant. But you talked about kind of continuing something competitive after football. Is there a reason? Like, did you have any other interests or thoughts about what's the next step for me after I finish up in this sport? Like, where am I going? Kind of what were the options on the table, or what were you considering before you found weightlifting?
So honestly, after I finished playing college football, it's, for so much time I've had somebody telling me where to be and what meeting to go to, make sure to go to class, lift this at this time, run here, do that. So for like the first, I want to say maybe 4 months, I didn't do anything like at all. I just kind of like chilling, relaxing, And you know how that goes. 4 months down the line, looked into the mirror and said, "Oh man, we got to change some things."
Mm.
So honestly, it just kind of started off as a just like a get back in the gym and start getting fit type of situation. And that only took me so far just because you're putting in all this training, but there wasn't really like something I was working towards to show if what I'm doing is working. And it kind of started off with a bunch of my friends trying to get me into powerlifting and strongman, and me like brushing it off and not wanting to try it or anything, and just I did that for like 2 years, saying no, I don't really want to get into anything different right now. I'm just going to keep doing my thing, working my job, and until finally, I decided to try doing some cleans again because I thought I was pretty good at them in college, but if I review the footage now with the knowledge I have now, I'd be making fun of myself.
Right.
And I mean, it just turned into a thing where I already like doing cleans. There's this other movement that I'd seen some guy do where he just threw it over his head in one movement, kind of piqued my interest. And then I slowly started learning about this being a sport, and that's kind of how I got into it now.
Yeah. Were you at any point kind of? I'm just curious to know because I think there are a lot of different time points where it's kind of trying to figure out like what's the next step. What am I doing? Um, Part of that's like throughout high school, after high school, into college, throughout college, after college, first job. As you make those kind of major life transitions, it's like figuring out what feels right or what is right, based on what you've done, what you're doing, and what you want to do. As
Mm-hmm.
far as work, were you kind of like in gyms, uh, just kind of doing that based on kind of what you said? That sounds like it was your passion and your interest. What were you kind of doing for work in the meantime, or what were you interested in doing?
So I got my degree in, I got an industrial safety degree. So for anyone that doesn't know, like basically becoming like an OSHA person.
Hmm.
And I did that for a couple of years. I started off at the Goodyear tire plant because that was in my hometown in Lawton, Oklahoma. Kind of get my foot in the door, and after that, it evolved into me moving to Nebraska and doing it the same position for a small community college, and just kind of working on the side. And then eventually, I got into hotshot trucking because my legs started getting big again. Pants didn't fit, and I didn't really like hanging out with the crowd in the offices. I spent most of my time hanging out with like maintenance technicians. The
Hmm.
guys on the what some people would consider on the lower end, more down to earth people. That's kind of the people I resonated with, and I ended up getting into hotshot trucking. And this was, of course, before I got into weightlifting, so I didn't know how inconvenient it would become once I started. But
Hmm.
you know, that's kind of what I was doing for work around the time.
Yeah, and then you uh, ended up getting back into lifting, realizing like, hey, this is a thing that I could be incredible at. And I went through your Instagram and I was kind of looking at old videos, and it's always funny when you find people who take to training really well, like respond really well to training, and have this like affinity for it because you watch them lift and you're like, man, it's unbelievable how weights that heavy can move that easily or that well, um, with whatever technique, right? Like I've seen people who have, you know, horrendous technique by definition, uh, but they're lifting massive, massive weights. And then you also see people who are really athletic take to like coordination or like technique really well, and they're lifting massive weights. And I think the story a lot of people know is going to be Wes Kitts, and kind of following him from playing collegiate ball into getting into training, and then he's doing like 140, 190, and I don't even know if he had a coach at that point. And I remember going back through your Instagram and I watched you. I think there was like a 190 clean, and then there was a 200 clean, and it's like, holy cow, this guy is going to be a great weightlifter. So what was kind of that process of, figuring out that, like, oh, this is something I'm good at? Was it like minimal coaching and you were cleaning 200 kilos, or was that something that took a good amount of time and refinement and work on your end?
Express the passion that defines you. At Virus, we understand that when it comes to performance, the slightest edge can mean the difference between winning and losing. Each product is designed and tested with performance in mind. This principle inspired the technology that is infused into our apparel. Built with the intention to move with you and work for you, we create tools meant to help express the passion that defines you. The future of technology-driven apparel. Improve performance, prevent fatigue, recover faster, and go further. Virus is a proud sponsor of Josh Gibson and the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. Use code PHILWL for 10% off at checkout. That's PHILWL, PHILWL, for 10% off.
I would say, okay, the weights started coming pretty quick in the beginning, but with like really bad technique, and I saw that become a detriment pretty early because I started getting like a lot of knee pain, and I wasn't really doing a whole lot about it at the time. So I feel like the strength has been there because I was already doing all the lifting. I had the football background, so kind of like relearning how to be strong, it came a little bit faster. But I got beat down pretty quick by the fact that I couldn't just muscle my way through the sport. So at the time, my clean was going up because I was able to make a few more mistakes and it still kind of work out, versus where like my snatch was, I think in my first competition I did 148 and then I did 203 on clean and jerk. So there's like a pretty big gap there. So I could tell that technique was, it's going to be something I can't, avoid. I can't just muscle my way through this sport.
Yeah. And how like, knowing that you did those numbers at the competition, like how strong were you when you started to get into prioritizing the weightlifting movements? Because 203 kilos is kind of like a really, really, really small fraction of people who get into weightlifting. So to do that with inefficient technique or not great technique, I think that means you probably had a good surplus of strength that allowed you to kind of move around weights like that. So just for perspective, what were some of your PRs when you started getting into weightlifting and putting up numbers like that?
So I didn't track a lot of bench or anything like that. So I mean, I was probably like 400, something like that, which I mean, who cares? Squatting like mid 600s, and I never really learned how to properly deadlift. So I would do some deadlifts, but they'd be light, and just trying not to mess up anything, because I mean, I was just afraid that I would hurt my back trying to do deadlifts, because at the time I was watching all these videos, and one video says don't do this, and then the other one says this, do this, right, and then eat this, don't eat that. I was kind of caught in that little funnel. But I did have a pretty good like strength reserve going into it. It was just over time trying to figure out how to use it more efficiently, so I could do this for a longer time and not just come in gung-ho, try to beat up my body by hitting whatever numbers I can with horrible technique, and then having to stop early because I'm running out of money because I'm spending it all on hospital bills.
Right. No, that makes complete sense. And I guess this is like the perfect opportunity to kind of go through the training that you have done in kind of your career in athletics, and how that was able to get you to the point of having this strength surplus. And maybe you can even, I think one thing that's interesting, and a long time ago, kind of at this point, Seb and I were lucky enough, like fortunate enough, to have a conversation with Shane Hammond on the Weightlifting House podcast. If people want to listen to it, they can search it and find it. And I remember him mentioning that day one, it was at like he was at like strength and conditioning for football, and hit some absolutely obscene numbers. I want to say he squatted 500 pounds and benched like 300 pounds. He was 15 years old,
Jeez.
and yeah, and you're like, okay. And now you think about him, squatting. Supposedly, he squatted 700 pounds for 10 at the Olympic Training Center. He's snatched almost 200 kilos and clean and jerked almost 240. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that kind of checks out, right? That like makes sense. When you first touched a barbell or first touched weights, where were you in terms of kind of like baseline strength levels, and then we can get into with training, with sports, how that changed.
So when you say that, do you mean like first time ever in life or first
Yeah,
time
ever
whenever?
ever in life.
Ooh, that would have been, I want to say, seventh grade,
Hmm.
because that's when I first started playing football, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I was awful. I was just out there trying to do something after school. My dad played football, so I figured, why not give it a shot? And that's when I first started lifting, but it wasn't really like I wasn't really super motivated,
Hmm.
if I'm completely honest. And then I ended up taking like a year off from football and also weights because there's no other way for me to access weights at the time. And kind of thought about it again and came back in the 8th grade. And that's when I was like, okay, I need to start taking, the weights more serious because, I was tired of getting tossed around on the field. I wanted to be the person doing the tossing. And it just, from then on, it was almost like the weight room took more of a priority than actually
Hmm.
the football part of it. So, I mean, to be honest, I was good enough to make it all the way to the collegiate level football wise, but I wasn't the greatest. It was I made up for a lot of mistakes with just being way stronger than whoever I was
Hmm.
lined up against. So I really took the weight room serious going like from then on, just 8th grade all the way out.
Yeah, when did you notice that the weight room made a big impact? Because in 8th grade, it's going to be tough initially because there's that period of just developing strength, getting the coordination, trying to figure out movements, almost like you kind of earn this ability to put weight on the bar to get stronger by getting the basic techniques down and just training long enough. When did you realize, like, oh, I'm gonna be the guy bullying people around? Was that kind of right away, or did that take a little bit of time?
It probably set in the first day of practice in 9th grade when one of the older kids, I think we were running. I was on defense, and they were running like a zone. I want to say to the right, and I met this guy at the line, and he knocked me, I swear, probably 5 yards down the
Mm.
field. And that's just one of those feelings where I was like, don't ever want to feel this again. And I want to say that's one of them. And then another one was probably in 9th grade. We were all in the weight room getting ready to test Max's out, and I looked over at my buddy. His name was Maurice, and he had the biggest squat in the on the team. And I asked him, because I just got done with my little. I don't even remember what I hit. Probably wasn't that great. And I asked him, say, hey man, when are you gonna start going? He's like, no, no, no. I'm gonna wait till the end because I'm the main event.
Ooh,
That kind of really like resonated with me at the time because then I was like, that sounds pretty good. Whenever I step up to the barbell for my max out, I want to be the main event.
mm. Yeah, and I noticed, again, you were on the rogue stage at the Arnold, and that's kind of for weightlifting, that's kind of one of them, and kind of seeing that climb up. I bet that's really really satisfying, and kind of mirrors exactly what you're saying. So throughout high school, again, was
Yeah,
that
the
something
awesome
where
part about that
consistently you were able
actually.
to train? um, sure.
Sorry, I think I cut you off there because I had a little
Oh, you're
lapse.
good.
But the awesome part about that, what you were saying about me getting to lift on the Rogue stage, was that actually the year previous, I was just at the Arnold to watch, and I think I watched CJ Cummins do a 195 clean and jerk.
Mm.
And at that moment, I was standing there thinking, I was like, hopefully next year I'll get a chance to lift here. Not thinking about the Rogue stage, just competing in general at the Arnold.
Yeah, that is awesome. And I'm sure like those moments are going to happen kind of more and more frequently, as you stay in weightlifting and develop. Um, eh, and I don't want to jump too far ahead because I already have questions about Olympics and kind of goals that have been set and what you ultimately want to do. But um, throughout high school, when did you kind of have the sense that you were going to be able to play football at the next level? And um, I don't. Do you remember kind of many of the milestones you were able to hit kind of along the way in the weight room, just so we kind of have a sense of like, oh, this is when 500-pound squat happened, or 600-pound squat, or 400-pound bench, or something like that. Like throughout your time, kind of training and then developing as a football player, what did that look like?
So I started kind of getting an idea that I'd be able to compete at the next level probably more around my junior year of high school, because I played for a school. We weren't really the greatest at football, but we had coaches there that cared, and they really tried to help develop me as an athlete. And I had a couple offers start rolling in towards like the back half of my high school career, and I ended up going to University of Central Oklahoma, and they're the ones that picked me up. But along the way, on the biggest milestone that I remember was uh, I had loaded up I want to say 315, and we didn't have bumper plates or anything, so we had metal plates, which is, looking back, seems kind of silly that we were doing cleans with metal plates and we were dropping them, but that's beside the point. And I remember just picking it up, and we were maxing out for our hang clean, and this was probably junior year, about like in the off season.
Mm.
And one of my coaches actually looks at me and says, because I tell him, it's like, hey, I'm gonna hang clean this 315, and he looks at me and says, no, you ain't gonna do that. And I guess that was the first time he had ever seen somebody, I guess in high school, hang clean over 300 pounds. So I was pretty proud of that moment. And we actually maxed out that day on, which seems kind of weird now, but it was bench, incline bench, hang clean, and then back squat.
Hmm.
And out of the four, I was one of the first people to total in the 1300 region.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually ended up giving me a T-shirt that said, 1300-pound club or whatever. And at the time, that was really exciting for me. And
Yeah.
then that just kind of solidified how much more I enjoyed the weight room than honestly the football aspect of it. Because whenever I look back, there's not a ton of stuff I can remember that was super exciting from football, but there's a ton of stuff I remember that was super exciting for me in the weight room.
Yeah. Do you think that was something that a feeling that was shared by many of your teammates, or was that something that was unique to you in that you were just really able to take advantage of your time in the weight room, you wanted to develop, you were able to develop. Was that something that you noticed with teammates as well in high school and in college, or was that something that was kind of more isolated to you?
To be honest, I'm not really sure. That it might have been me and a couple of other guys, but in high school we were in a 6A, which is the highest level in Oklahoma high school football. But we had a lot of people that were just there to have something to do in the afternoon, and I don't think we had a lot of people that were pushing to try to get to another level after that. So I think it was pretty isolated to me and maybe like three or four of my other teammates who I typically would look to whenever we would get in the weight room and kind of keep each other motivated.
Hmm. And then how did that change when you went from high school to University of Central Oklahoma. Was there? I mean, I'm you talking about hang cleaning 315 with metal plates. Uh, what was that transition like going from a high school that can be really really hit and miss with the equipment, the quality of coaching, um, the environment, all of that stuff, to a collegiate setting where athletics is taken much more seriously. There's more money pumped into it, resources, and everything's concentrated, at least in the U.S., um, mostly on football, and then baseball and basketball, and other sports that kind of get a lot of the shine. So what was that like going from high school to college, from like the strength and conditioning perspective?
I mean, in general, it was moving up to the next step. Pretty much leaving home, going to a different city is, it was kind of a lot at the time. But just knowing, I would say I'm pretty humble, but knowing that once I get there, I'm bottom of the totem pole again,
Mm.
small fry or whatever. And with where I was at technique wise on the football field, I knew I'd get redshirted the first year. So basically just taking what I'd been doing in high school and saying, all right, I'm going to go in here and set a strong foundation in the weight room and make that my priority. And then, of course, also make football a priority, because that was the main reason I was there for. Just kind of build a solid foundation that way, and then just work my way up. Of course, as soon as I got there, I told myself, it's like, within the next couple years, I want to be the top guy in the weight room, and then that will help me on the field. Like, it would transition over to helping me overcome some of my technical faults by making up
Mm.
for it with strength, which, for the most part, still worked as I was, trying to develop myself as an athlete on the football field as well.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, even from a broader perspective, what was your experience like playing football, in college, and then what were some of the things that you look back fondly on? It could be in the weight room or on the field. I think just having a sense of what that's like to go from, you know, being a kid who, even as you mentioned, kind of started getting interested in football, took a year off, came back, spent a lot of time in the weight room prioritizing that, spent a lot of time playing football, and then was able to get offers and looks to play at the next level. When you made that transition, what was it like, and do you feel like it kind of satisfied that urge or that interest to be a collegiate athlete?
Okay, yeah, it was the transition of it was hard. It's a lot of changes coming all at once, but I knew what I was there to do and that I wanted to be there.
Mm.
And it ends up being, if you already love the sport, if it's football or whatever you may go into, it just becomes more of a priority, and there's more consequences for not following through with basically your end of the deal when it comes to nutrition, sleep, training,
Mm.
and things like that. But honestly, the biggest thing that I got out of it is just the teammates that I had. Like, a lot of them, I would consider them brothers. So yeah, those are the guys that I remember, doing bear crawls in sleet with whenever we got in trouble for doing something stupid, or that one time that you oversleep for class and you make the whole weight room have to do gassers after practice.
Mm.
I mean, at the time, whenever that stuff was going on, it wasn't really a fond memory. But now looking back at it, it's like one of those things where we sit around a table and we laugh about it. So I guess it probably sounds to you mostly like I was there for like the brotherhood, the companionship, and just the camaraderie that you build with a group of people that are going through the exact same thing as you, and it makes it really hard to quit on them whenever you know that they're working just as hard.
Oh, yeah, that was a great answer, and it was able to kind of put me in that situation and kind of see what it would be like to have to endure that, and then you know continue to experience that, and then all right, uh next thing's up, right?
Oh
whatever
yeah.
whatever the whatever the tough experiences, or whatever the failure successes, the successes, kind of everyone's in it together. going through all of it, so you can kind of lean into that, and then you realize you're like also part of making that happen. So I think that was a great description of it. Then once you kind of fast forwarding a little bit to once you graduated, and you kind of mentioned it, in the sense of like you had 2 years of kind of working and moving around a little bit. Were you getting any coaching or any kind of direction or instruction before you started working with Bear? Because as far as I'm concerned, that's my only knowledge of you being in weightlifting is with Bear and working with Brittany. So what was your development like after college, in the sense of, was there any direction? Was there any coaching? Were you just kind of lifting with training partners and trying to kind of piece things together?
So right after, whenever I was working and just working out on the side, I basically did the exact thing that I kept being told not to do, and it was YouTube research and getting information from influencers and trying out this hot new workout, this hot new diet, and just kind of ping-ponging around, and for like a year and a half, just really getting just thrown through a blender. And so actually before Bear, which would have been, let me see, November of 21, I want to say, the person that introduced me into weightlifting was Christopher Bussell, who was coaching out at Southwest Barbell in Lawton, who just recently moved up to New York and was coaching at a different barbell club now. So he was actually the one that got me into the sport. Earlier when I mentioned that I had like tested a clean or something a year and a half ago, and he ended up seeing the video that I posted on the internet and kind of calling me in the next day and asking me if I want to learn how to snatch. And, that's really what got the ball rolling.
Yeah. And once you did start working with Bear, where were you at in terms of kind of what you were able to do up to that point? And then I guess even where your head was at, and because I don't know what that situation was like in terms of you reaching out, her reaching out, how the connection was made, what the discussion was of, hey, this is what we want to do, this is what we're going to be able to do. So where were you physically, and then where were you from a mindset perspective of your place in the sport of weightlifting?
So after that very first meet I did in Norman, where I hit the 149 and 203, after that things started moving like pretty quickly, because Ray started throwing out acronyms I had never heard of, NRS, things like that, going towards, possible Team USA. And I'm just over here standing like, dude, I just did my first meet. I'm having fun. I was like, can we calm down for a second and, pump the brakes real quick? I'm just getting started. So that's the numbers that I was around. And then a couple months it went by, and the way I got linked up with Brittany was actually, it's a funny long story. It ended up being she helped coach one of my friends at another meet, who then it ended up trickling back to Dan Hunsucker, who's also one of my teammates on Bear, who he ended up reaching out to Jake Panisse, who was also on her team at the time, brought on to the team. And I started seeing some of the things that he was doing working out wise, and he was dealing with some knee aches and pains and stuff like that. And I saw him start to get better. So that caused me to reach out, and it was kind of just like a domino effect that led me to Bear. Up to that point, I had snatched 170 with the ugliest form I think I've put on video to date. And my clean and jerk was still kind of just stuck around 203, because I kept trying to take that big jump to 210, and I just kept getting shot off the platform again and again and again.
Hey, what's up, weightlifters? Danny here, founder of Onyx Weightlifting Co., a leather accessories company specializing in weightlifting gear. In our shop, we make gear that doesn't get in the way of your performance, because we understand that hitting lifts requires your full attention. Our straps, wrist wraps, and belts are designed to be comfortable and reliable, so all you need to do is make lifts. Thanks for listening to our friend Josh's podcast. You can continue to support him by visiting our online shop at onyxstraps.com and using his code PHILWL. That's PHILWL at checkout. See you on the platform.
Yeah, and I'll kind of get into more of like, okay, you start working with Bear, and then kind of the milestones you've been hitting just in terms of competitions, placings, and lifts. But how did you feel? I mean, you say snatch 170, and it's kind of this throwaway comment, and it's like and then trying to clean and jerk 210 and get spat out. How did you feel kind of like throughout your time training when you were hitting those numbers, because you were so strong? And I know you mentioned it a little bit with like, you don't want to be super inefficient and super strong and feel really beat up. You'd rather move well, be efficient, place the bar where it needs to be so you can load the body properly. But how did you feel kind of as you were getting up into those really, really big weights, without being able to move super well?
It's probably gonna sound kind of sad, but it was cool for a little while. But because I kind of ruined my expectations by watching, I discovered Lasha and seeing the numbers he was hitting
Yeah.
and things like that. So at the time, it was really hard for me to be like excited about what I was doing, because I was like, damn man, I still have so far to go. But I've been getting better about kind of realizing that we're doing great, we're doing fine.
Mhm.
It's pretty early on, and I need to celebrate more so that I get more enjoyment out of it than I already do, because I was for like a large chunk of the beginning, I was kind of beating myself up thinking about how much further I still have to go, and I was never actually looking at how far I've come.
Sure. No, that makes complete sense. And kind of knowing Lasha is like the pinnacle of weightlifting. When you started working with Brittany, and the conversation does become teams and points and placings, was there kind of this like clear path to, oh, this is where we are, this is where we want to go? Or was it like, I'm just going to start working with you, we'll run a program, we'll start training, we'll just start kind of trying to tighten things up and see kind of where we're at after that? Or was there like the initial conversation was Olympics this or international teams that?
I mean, our initial conversation wasn't really anything like that, because I mean, she saw the videos that I had and she knew there was a lot of work to be done. And it was really just, it was pretty hard at the beginning too, because I'd just come off of snatching like 170 on my birthday at Cal Strength on a random like road trip that I had for work, to getting limited down to like 100 kilos and having to stop anytime the technique got really funky. So just immediately we just started rebuilding and then focusing heavily on just doing rehab exercises so I could get my knees back, so I wouldn't, because for a while in the beginning, anytime I touched anything over like 190 on a clean and jerk, I'd have to like not lift for 3 days to kind of let my knees get back better. So it was a lot of technique work and a lot of rebuilding in the beginning, and then those talks about teams and possible Olympics, things like that came after Texas State, where luckily I had like a 3 or 4 week period where I really wasn't driving 5 days a week, and I was able to train consistently, and ended up putting 170 215 on a platform. And then that's when we sat down and started talking about taking this a lot more serious so we could make teams and stay in it for the long run.
Yeah, and that timeline from snatching 170, rebuilding, and then kind of getting back into the swing of things. When do you feel like your lifting kind of took a like turn the corner and you were able to start hitting that stride, so you end up on the rogue stage and you're ending up on international platforms, and you're kind of in this conversation now where it is Keiser, Aaron, you know, the situation that we're currently in? When do you feel like it kind of started moving in that direction?
I would say it started moving in that direction whenever I came down to San Antonio to be in-house rather than remote,
Mm.
and just being able to have eyes on for every rep during every training session, and kind of getting corrections, right away. And I think that helped speed up my progress. And, it got to where, you'd feel good for a while, and then I would start thinking there's something missing, and then we figure something out, and then you have this eureka moment, and then you're training and everything feels good, and then you hit another little roadblock, and we just kept chopping away at roadblocks after roadblocks, and it's just kept getting better over time, and I mean, here we are now.
Yeah, and how has it been with the move, and I guess training down there in person, kind of putting weightlifting on the front burner? How has that been for you?
It's been nice. It's taken a lot of variables out of the equation, and it just really puts the focus on my effort, and making sure that I do my part, and making smart decisions while I'm training, listening to my body, things like that, taking it easier whenever my knees aren't really feeling it, and then pushing through when I know that I'm just being soft.
Yeah, and do you find that you're someone who's pretty self motivated, pretty self driven, a really hard worker, and kind of like committed to just grinding it out? I know you said kind of have a reminder there, but do you think just baseline you're someone who loves to work, right? Because that's kind of what the weight room is. I mean, a lot of the stuff involved in the weight room is just kind of a grind, and it's just years and years of work, um, for incremental progress. So for you, is that something that just tends to exist, tended to come naturally, or is that something you still have to kind of remind yourself of and really work on?
Yeah, to be honest, it's taken a lot of work, just because whenever I switched from basically a team oriented sport to, I mean, I still consider it a team sport, because at the end of the day, when we show up to a national meet or something like that, we're all wearing the same emblem, and we're all
Hmm.
looking to score points for the team. But during training, it's kind of just you relying on yourself, because on a team of any sort, whenever you start slacking, you got, say, on the football field, you got 10 other guys, ready to jump your ass whenever
Hmm.
you're not doing your part. So it's one of those things where I have to constantly remind myself, is like, you know, nobody's here to babysit me. I need to make sure that I stay on top of things on my own, and just have goals, achievable goals, smaller goals along the way, to kind of keep myself self-motivated.
Yeah, and where you are currently, what do those goals look like?
So, well, as of right now, with since I got bumped off the world's team, right now it's just focus on technique, get stronger, and then when the next opportunity arrives for me to possibly qualify for a team, it's kind of that weird limbo period where you're just kind of focusing on yourself,
Hmm.
you know making sure I'm on top of all the things that I can be on top of, and trying to gain as much strength, do anything I can to kind of close the gap between me and Keiser, because I mean, I like competition. There's the one thing I do love about this is, like, there's no animosity between any of the guys that are at the top. I've talked to all of them. I like hanging out with all of them genuinely, but we're all really competitive when it comes time to start touching the barbell.
Hmm.
But I mean, he's kind of like the final boss of a game for me right now. So I'm trying to work, because he's got how many years on me? I got a lot of work to do to try to catch up to this man.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how that plays out. What what are your thoughts on what you could potentially do in the sport? And I think I mentioned this maybe at the start of the conversation, or maybe it was off air. I don't quite remember, but I know Keiser talked about, 200, 210, 240-ish. Have you thought about the numbers you think you're ultimately capable of, or you would like to be able to do at some point? And I say before you hang it up, that's like so far away from now, it's got to be hard to imagine what that would look like. But what are some of your, I say lofty, but some of the really long-term goals that you have in mind?
So for the most part, I mean, I don't know what I'll be able to hit, you know, as an ultimate number until it happens. But I've always been motivated by like record boards. So whenever I first started, the first thing I looked at was like the Oklahoma records, and I wanted to take those and kind of just looking throughout the states. The next, I want to take the Texas records, of course, and then I started looking into the national ones. So my first like major goal was 200 and 240.
Yeah.
Just to be able to have my name on the national record list. And it sounds like I'm gonna have to work for some higher numbers there if we got Keiser shooting for a little more than that. But that would be my ultimate goal, is to to have my name on the list for
and
however long they're up
yeah,
there.
yeah. And you guys are, I say lucky, but fortunate that the super heavyweight class doesn't move, and that's why Shane's records have stuck around, is because that class is really the only class that doesn't change. So those records are going to kind of live on until they're broken, and then those records will live on until they're potentially broken. So being able to take down, the 197.5 and the 237.5 would kind of put you in this position to live on, forever, given that doesn't change. And, who's to say so far it's been 23 years and Shane's records are still standing. But it's got to be a great feeling to know that, if you can do that, and when you do that and you have your name in the books as being the strongest or the best American super heavyweight of all time, that's going to live on until someone else who is pound for pound, kilo for kilo stronger comes around and knocks them off.
Oh yeah, that's kind of like the ultimate goal, I guess you could call it, for me right now, because that would kind of go along with what I've been doing in the past, looking for a reason to be on some kind of record list.
Yeah. And thinking about competitions and medals and placings and all that stuff, do you have any interest, I say interest, but like desire to make the Olympics, make multiple Olympics, medal at the Olympics, or is it something that you're kind of set on chasing numbers or chasing the record board? And if you do that, if you can knock Shane off the books, if you can kind of get ahead of Keiser, you're going to be looking at an Olympics. You're going to be looking at all these things that naturally come along with being the best American weightlifter.
Yeah, that's another one. I would 100% love an opportunity to represent the country at the Olympics. It's just with me getting started so late and like halfway through a quad, it wasn't really something that I was focusing on as much, because I still had way more work to do on the technique side of things, and just getting reps under my belt. So it was one of those things where I was chasing it while I could, but the second that I lost that world spot, it kind of, we pushed that off to the side, and we were looking more long term. So I mean, I would love an opportunity to make it in 28. So if I'm able to achieve, what we just talked about, and if I get a chance to go out there and lift in LA during the Olympics, that would 100% be the next step up for me.
And along with being the best American weightlifter of all time, if you manage to snatch and clean and jerk American records, do you have any other favorite lifts, or any other numbers you'd like to take down in terms of back squat, front squat, push press, jerk, any other exercise where you're like, man, it'd be really, really cool to hit, a 400 kilo back squat or a 200 kilo push press or 220 kilo, something like that. Do you have any lifts that you would love to do just for fun and for how it sounds?
I would probably like to a 500-pound or a 227 kilo push press would be pretty cool. So far, I've done 200 for 3, but
Push press?
yeah,
Holy shit. Christ.
I was gonna say my push press is okay, and yeah, I think a 227 kilo push press would be pretty sweet.
That'd be awesome. That'd be badass. And given that, I think I'm a big numbers guy. I'm a big like weightlifting kind of training theory and programming guy. The numbers generally play out. You'll push press around 73% of your jerk. That's why I am absolutely blown away by the fact you've push press 200 for a triple. I could only imagine. What do you think you could jerk if you could push press 500 pounds?
The best I've done, I mean, I stopped pushing it, but I did 235 off the blocks, and I think I might have been able to get a little bit more, but shoulda, coulda, woulda if I didn't try. So I don't know. But I mean, with like jerks and push presses, I feel like I'm really good at those. It's just the whole movement of getting it off the floor into the front rack that I got to get a little bit better at.
Yeah, I think I speak for everyone when we say we'd love to see a 250 jerk. And that to be honest doesn't sound very far off. I'm not quite sure what the heaviest jerk is of all time from an American period. I wouldn't imagine it's got to be close to 250. I'm sure there have been some like 230s, maybe 240 behind the neck. But I can't imagine anyone's jerked 250. And if people know of American weightlifters who have jerked 250 or more, please message us and curse us out for not knowing, because that's got to be a phenomenal lift. What about squats? What's your best? Do you have a best like front squat, back squat, and then do you have goals for those? Just weights you'd like to be able to hit at some point?
So right now, I haven't gone for a heavy single in a while, but we did 280 for a triple leading up to Cuba. And for front squats, right now my best is 260.
Yeah.
And for goals on those, of course, 300 kilos for 3 reps would be pretty sweet. That'll be my first little goal. And then if I could touch a 300 kilo front squat, that'd be pretty damn cool for me.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. So while you're pursuing weightlifting glory, what are you doing to kind of support yourself and make it work? Are you coaching? Are you doing one-on-ones? You have companies you're working with? Because I'm thinking, how do we get people your way in terms of if they want to get coaching, if they want to come work with you in person, if they want to use some sort of discount code or buy some sort of products you collaborate on. What do you have going on that people can get involved with?
So actually, I'm not working with anyone right now. I don't do any coaching, anything like that. I've got like a discount code for one of my favorite nutrition shops, 5-star nutrition, PHILWL. If you care to use it, it'll save you a little bit of money. But for the most part, I'm 100% in on just training, recovering, training more. I'll have a little side job coming up here to help supplement since I was able to land a stipend with the Cuba competition. But before that, a lot of the support came from the team.
That's awesome. It's great to have, a group around you who sees, your potential and honestly, like truly wants to help you realize it. So that's really special. I think, you know, you getting more exposure through podcasts, just people being able to share around your lifts and your content and all the stuff you're doing. I think that's a great way to potentially attract companies and ways to even get some more income to kind of supplement your training so you can continue to prioritize that. So everyone who goes and watches, you know, your lifts on Instagram, because they're saying there's no way this guy has jerked 235 or snatched, you know, as much as you have, or hit these lifts. No, go find them. They're on Instagram. It's PHILWL59. Go give him a follow. Go check out all of his lifts. Share them around. Uh, is there anything you want to say to people who are listening who kind of clicked on this, and kind of now know who you are, where you've come from, what you're doing, and what you're about?
Oh, other than don't be deceived by my Twitter handle, I'm not a 59 kilo lifter. That catches a lot of people by surprise. I don't know why. Just a kind of a unfortunate coincidence, but you know, I'm just kind of here for the ride. Found something that I'm interested in. Just trying to see how far I can take it. You know, one day at a time.
Yeah, I mean that resonates. What exactly is your body weight? Because I remember I was in Colorado Springs. I was in Norik Vardanian's gym. Kaiser's walking around, and I don't remember how this happened, but I was like, Kaiser, what are you weighing right now? And he just kind of says, you know, in a deep voice, 160. It's like, holy shit, you look great for being 160 kilos. Like that man is humongous and carries every kilo of it well. So what do you walk around at? Because, you know, you're similar in that you just look like an oversized human. You don't look like a Razazadeh. You know, you don't look like someone who's kind of reached the pinnacle of putting on muscle and has transitioned to just putting on weight. So what do you like, 165, 160 is kind of around the same weight?
You know, it's pretty funny because I honestly feel like Kaiser makes me feel small, but I'm walking around about 177.
Oh, really? Holy
Yeah,
cow. You must be freaking tall then. How tall are you?
6'2.5".
Six two and a half. Holy cow. All right. Is there any plan or thought of gaining more body weight intentionally, or is it something where, hey, you just train, uh, run the program, do what's going to get you better? If body weight comes on, body weight's going to come on, but it's nothing where you're trying to get up to, say, 185, 190. Is there any intentional gaining going on?
I don't wish to stress my joints any more than I have to. So honestly, we're probably going to work on cutting it down a little bit. I don't wish to be any heavier. It's just, you know, it's cool and all when it comes to lifting weights, but then whenever your buddy pulls up in his cool little car and you can't shut the door because your thigh hits it, pushes it back out, you know, it feels kind of bad.
Yeah, I could only imagine what it's like, you know, being 177 kilos. I think I'm really glad I asked that, because I think a lot of people are going to be surprised to hear it. I mean, Aaron, I appreciate you coming on the show and kind of sharing your story with everyone and giving people a glimpse into where you've been, what you're doing, what you plan on doing. And for everyone listening, go shoot them a follow on Instagram. Give them whatever support you can. You can find me on Instagram as well at Josh_PhilWL. That's PHILWL. Philosophical weightlifting everywhere else. You can help support the show by sharing this around. You know, go ahead and get a screenshot, click the little share button, and put it on your story. You can also visit any of our sponsors that you've heard advertisements from during the podcast. And until next week, we will catch you guys on another episode of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast.